In a shocking new twist, it's rumored that Donald Trump is exploring unprecedented plans to operate the White House from his private jet if re-elected. Sources allegedly close to the former president hint at a secret strategy, using Air Force One as his command center, where he could potentially avoid what he sees as the D.C. swamp and maintain a constant presence across the U.S. According to these insider whispers, Trump's idea revolves around redefining executive power by literally staying above it all, both physically and politically. In Trump's envisioned scenario, his jet would be equipped with high-tech war rooms, security quarters, and direct lines to the country's key leaders, all while flying at a moment's notice. Supporters say this approach could bring a level of freedom and flexibility unlike any presidency before, while critics call it a publicity stunt aimed at escaping accountability. Some rumors suggest that Trump's circle believes operating the government from 30,000 feet would allow him to bypass bureaucratic hurdles, lending him more flexibility to take action without the constraints of in-person meetings and D.C. red tape. His critics, however, worry about how such a move would impact government transparency, communications, and security protocols. Would Congress be able to reach him at will, or would this distance create unprecedented executive secrecy? This bold plan has sparked intense debate on both sides. Could this sky-high presidency truly become reality, or is it just a media stunt meant to stir his base? With Trump's history of turning the ordinary into extraordinary, anything seems possible. One thing certain, if this rumor holds any truth, the 2024 election could usher in an era like no other in U.S. history. Speculation swirls as Trump's possible return to the White House brings unprecedented strategies. Insiders hint at Trump's desire to govern from his private jet, transforming it into a mobile command center. His vision includes conducting briefings mid-flight and addressing crises in real time, without setting foot in the Capitol. Supporters see this as a bold move for efficiency, one that positions him literally above the political fray, reacting instantly and symbolically as a leader above it all. The jet would become the ultimate power symbol, a testament to his unique style of governance. However, critics warn that governing from the skies could lead to isolation from the vital machinery of Washington. Many in government argue that distance from Congress, military advisors, and cabinet members could disrupt collaboration and undermine checks and balances. Trump's allies argue this setup would streamline operations, enabling him to act independently of D.C. entanglements. With the jet as his mobile base, they believe he'd avoid bureaucratic delays, swiftly executing decisions without interference. Some have even suggested Trump might want to rename Air Force One to reflect his unique approach. The proposal has sparked debates about presidential accessibility and accountability. By constantly flying, Trump could strategically land wherever he needs to address pressing issues, connecting directly with the American people and bypassing traditional channels. Supporters claim this agility would serve as a bold break from bureaucratic norms, bringing him closer to the nation's pulse. Yet, some argue this approach could redefine and possibly destabilize how the presidency functions. Critics are already questioning the implications of a flying White House, suggesting it could blur the lines of authority and communication with Washington's core. For Trump, this could symbolize ultimate power, but what would it mean for democracy? Would this shift create a presidency isolated from direct oversight? These questions fuel both excitement and concern, as rumors of this untraditional approach continue circulating. Rumors swirl around Trump's intent to operate a presidential war room from his aircraft, with advisors ready to join him at any altitude. Allegedly, he's looking into modifying his plane to create private quarters for close aides, allowing them to be nearby for urgent decisions. This setup would allow Trump unprecedented autonomy, enabling him to prioritize flexibility and rapid response. Imagine, if you will, a president who never stays in one place, a constantly moving leader who can shift focus, manage crises, and steer international policy from the skies. This concept reimagines the presidency entirely, as Trump potentially sidesteps limitations posed by a stationary office. By keeping his base of operations on the move, he may aim to stay ahead of the media, political opponents, and even domestic crises, unhindered by traditional restraints. The logistical aspects are intriguing. Advisors report that Trump's team is considering advanced communication systems for secure calls, video links, and emergency broadcasts from anywhere in the world. His private jet would transform into a fully functional, flying White House, enabling him to avoid the distractions and delays that can come with being grounded in one location. Some speculate that Trump's mobile approach would allow him to selectively land in states where support is strongest, thereby symbolizing a presidency closer to the people. It would mark a radical departure from previous administrations, turning each location he lands into a powerful, momentous event, and ensuring each decision is made within a supportive environment. Supporters praise the symbolic nature of this idea, suggesting that it could act as a direct rebuke to the Washington establishment. They argue that operating from the skies would reinforce his outsider status, making it clear he's not bound by the city that critics argue is entangled with political swamp dynamics. The jet could become an iconic image of Trump's administration, reminiscent of past leaders who have used their environments to build political mystique. His mobile headquarters could generate a sense of detachment from the old ways of governance, allowing him to redefine the presidency as an active, hands-on, and omnipresent figure. Critics, however, argue that by physically removing himself from the Capitol, Trump risks alienating essential allies and disconnecting from the apparatus of governance. Political analysts fear this might compromise his ability to communicate effectively with the institutions that are vital to enacting policies, upholding laws, and managing crises. For Trump, the jet might represent a form of ultimate independence, a way to avoid political pressures and carry out policies on his terms. This bold shift has fascinated supporters and alarmed detractors alike, as they contemplate a president who operates above the nation, both literally and figuratively. Some question the potential impact of security concerns, as running a presidency from a constantly moving aircraft would challenge conventional security measures. Coordinating with Secret Service and securing communication lines while in the air could introduce new logistical issues for his administration. As for public perception, Trump's mobile presidency could redefine what it means to be the commander-in-chief. To some, it would seem like a bold rejection of bureaucracy. To others, a worrying distance from the essential duties of governance. How would the American people respond to a president who rarely steps foot in the White House itself? Analysts warn that while this could appeal to his base, it might isolate other supporters who prefer a more traditional approach to leadership. Some Americans might question whether a mobile presidency could lead to inconsistencies in decision-making or unpredictable policy shifts due to limited on-ground interactions. Supporters, however, argue that this would symbolize Trump's dedication to real-time problem-solving and demonstrate his commitment to staying engaged on a grassroots level, where the people's voices resonate most strongly. His presence in different cities could galvanize his support base, building excitement for a presidency that reflects constant action and adaptability. Critics worry about the costs involved in constantly moving the presidential apparatus. Operating from the jet would require substantial funds for security, logistics, and travel, leading to questions about fiscal responsibility. Could such a move potentially drain government resources, diverting funds from essential programs? Moreover, political opponents question how long such an unconventional presidency could realistically be maintained. Is this merely a campaign tactic, or does Trump genuinely plan to carry out his duties from the sky indefinitely? The sustainability of this mobile approach has become a hot topic among analysts and pundits. The idea of a president on the move raises questions about accessibility. If Trump were to implement this plan, would Congress, state officials, and foreign dignitaries face difficulties coordinating with a constantly airborne leader? How would international relations be affected if the president rarely made personal appearances in Washington? While supporters tout the benefits of being untethered from D.C., skeptics argue that the lack of a fixed base could hinder long-term planning. Effective governance often relies on stability, collaboration, and face-to-face negotiations. Without these elements, they argue, policy execution may suffer. There's also debate on how this approach might impact Trump's relationship with Congress. By physically distancing himself from Capitol Hill, he could find it harder to work closely with lawmakers, potentially creating obstacles in achieving legislative goals. This move might represent a shift toward executive independence but could come at the cost of legislative collaboration. Supporters believe, however, that this unorthodox approach would add a tactical advantage, enabling him to pivot swiftly in times of crisis. A mobile presidency could prove to be incredibly versatile, with Trump operating in a constant state of readiness to respond to any issue that arises, from domestic policy to international affairs. Trump's critics continue to warn of the downsides, highlighting that a leader disconnected from his administration's day-to-day workings may struggle to maintain control. They argue that this distance could risk creating a government that's disjointed and lacks cohesion, potentially weakening overall stability. Nevertheless, the concept of a president on tour resonates with Trump's brand, appealing to a base that sees him as a populist figure who operates outside traditional norms. This strategy, if implemented, would represent a radical reimagining of the American presidency as a dynamic, omnipresent force. Trump's allies believe this approach would shake up the stagnant nature of Washington, challenging the status quo and putting government operations on the move. It would represent a unique way of governing that could set a precedent for future leaders, reshaping the expectations of a nation accustomed to a stationary executive office. Trump's airborne ambitions reveal a fascination with reinventing the presidency on his own terms. By transforming his jet into a command center, he could potentially bypass the structures of traditional governance, answering only to himself and those he chooses to bring along for the ride. His jet could act as a symbol of freedom from D.C., a place many supporters feel is filled with entrenched interests. The floating White House would give Trump the opportunity to control the narrative even more aggressively. By physically removing himself from Washington, he might communicate that he doesn't need to play by their rules. This symbolic gesture could speak volumes to those who feel the federal government has lost touch with their needs. Running the government from the sky might even appeal to Trump as a strategy for maintaining a level of unpredictability. Critics claim that if Trump's whereabouts are never fully known, it would allow him to keep his opponents on edge. Moving from one place to another, he could limit the ability of opposition forces to organize or mobilize against him. If Trump's team were to adopt the airborne approach fully, it would be unprecedented and challenging for his administration to set up the necessary infrastructure to support his constant movement. Officials would need to ensure reliable, real-time connections between the jet and essential departments in Washington, requiring top-level technology and resources. The jet presidency could also symbolize Trump's ultimate statement against the deep state he claims to fight. By governing from his aircraft, he may argue that he's demonstrating his refusal to be tied down by what he perceives as a bureaucratic stranglehold on his policies. This could play well to his base, who view him as a maverick leader unfazed by convention. Trump supporters believe that operating from the jet could be the ideal way to break the mold and create a new style of leadership that resonates with the digital age. With real-time updates, social media feeds, and 24/7 availability, he might be able to connect with citizens in a way that no stationary leader has before. Imagine the visuals. The presidential jet landing at crucial moments across the country, rallying his base, delivering speeches, and making decisions from locations strategically chosen to maximize impact. This unique approach would be unlike anything the nation has seen, reminiscent of wartime leaders coordinating from the skies. For Trump, embracing this mobile presidency would mean actively rejecting the historical norms that define how the U.S. has been governed. This setup could reinforce his outsider image, emphasizing his desire to prioritize the people over the Washington elite, making it clear that he answers only to his vision and values. The jet concept offers Trump a kind of diplomatic advantage, too, making him appear more like a traveling envoy. He could theoretically meet with international leaders at convenient locations worldwide, reducing the need for state visits to Washington and potentially speeding up the diplomacy process by bringing it directly to them. However, critics argue that Trump's jet presidency could further isolate him from the American public. While the move would appeal to his dedicated supporters, those who prefer stability and transparency might view it as an attempt to evade accountability. The novelty of a jet-based White House may wear thin as policy needs pile up. For security teams, a constantly moving president would require new levels of vigilance, planning, and coordination. They would face the enormous challenge of ensuring his safety in varying locations while preparing for potential threats. Despite this, supporters claim that Trump's movement could create an aura of invincibility, adding to his mystique. The logistics of keeping essential government officials within reach would mean that a core team would have to travel alongside him. This arrangement might lead to speculation about a shadow cabinet loyal only to him, reinforcing his critics' claims that he's distancing himself from the broader government structure. This mobile headquarters might even allow Trump to skip meetings or events he considers unnecessary, showing up only for issues that align with his agenda. Such selective appearances could be a double-edged sword, making him appear strong on topics he cares about while detached from broader responsibilities. Many wonder whether Trump would ever return to the traditional White House at all if he could manage a full administration from his plane. Operating from the jet could redefine the people's house as a concept that moves across the nation, embodying a government that's closer to its people in spirit, if not always in practice. Some question the message this would send to other nations. An airborne American presidency could be interpreted as both a display of power and a reluctance to engage in face-to-face diplomacy in Washington. Foreign leaders may struggle to take such a presidency as seriously if it seems more symbolic than functional. Supporters, however, argue that the jet would allow Trump to make quick, bold decisions free from the typical Washington scrutiny. Each decision, made in the air, could seem monumental and spontaneous, reinforcing the image of a president who governs with strength and vision, without being held back by red tape. For Trump's most devoted followers, this jet-based presidency could signify a leader who's literally above it all. By staying airborne, he would figuratively and literally rise above his critics, presenting an image of a leader unbothered by media backlash or political opponents. But detractors worry about the practicality of this arrangement, noting that without physical ties to Washington, Trump might struggle to keep up with the demands of a 24/7 presidency. The complex web of federal agencies and personnel needed to govern effectively would be strained by a president who is seldom present. Despite these concerns, supporters insist that Trump's ability to adapt and reinvent himself could extend to reinventing the presidency itself. They claim that his leadership style, honed through years in business and media, would suit a mobile, fast-paced administration that breaks away from tradition. The imagery of Air Force One in constant motion could add an air of drama and intrigue to his presidency, making every flight seem like a new chapter in a larger-than-life story. This new vision of leadership could capture the public's imagination in ways that other, more conventional presidencies simply couldn't. Whether or not this concept would become a reality, it continues to excite his base. Trump's potential willingness to take such extreme measures speaks to his unpredictable nature, keeping his followers engaged and his critics continually guessing his next move.